সেদিন যাদবপুরে পড়তে আসা, 1 মাসে ঠিক বলতে শেখা কলেজ ভাষা। এই তো সেদিন এক ছুটে মাঠ পার হয়েছি, ফেস্টে আবার ডিবেট সভায় খুব লড়েছি। দেখতে দেখতে দিনগুলো সব সোনার খাঁচায়, এখন আমায় প্রাক্তনীরা বাঁচতে শেখায়। আমরা যাদবপুর অ্যালামনি অ্যাসোসিয়েশন।
Good evening. I am Pranesh Gupta on behalf of Jadavpur University Alumni Association and President Dibyendu Chakraborty. Welcome you all to this second centenary evening lecture to be given by Dr. Vishnubodho Bhattacharya. To commemorate the 100th year of Jadavpur University Alumni Association, the Mumbai chapter has initiated a series of bi-monthly evening lecture, and today we will have our second lecture. I think at this time, when we are seeing the displays of wide range of applications of renewable energy sources at Tokyo Olympic, so this talk is very timely. Dr. Bhattacharya has nearly 5 decades experience in energy sector, almost equally in nuclear energy and thermal energy, and then for last 2 decades he has been working on renewable energy resources. His talk will be chaired by Commander Shushanto Kumar Jana. But before I hand over this session to Commander Jana, I will request to have a brief message from our President Mumbai chapter, Mr. Dibyendu Chakraborty, about the inception of Jadavpur University and its alumni association. So can we have that video, please?
Time of mankind. By this time, COVID-19 has taken a lot of lives. Some of our dear ones has also lost lives. So on behalf of Alumni Association, I express my heartfelt condolences to the families of this departed soul. First of all, let me take you back in the history 130 years to reflect about our roots. I am talking of the time in the late 19th century. In 1891, the great education reformer Vidyasagar died. And by that time, he has already inaugurated more than 300 schools, and Bengal was started getting the real education. And so as the scenario in whole Maharashtra with the hands of Mahatma Phule and his wife Savitribai Phule. But at the fag end of his life, Vidyasagar once lamented to Haraprasad Sastri by telling something in Bengali which translates to, we open the tap, students come out, they all are same. They all are from the same mold and they all say I has. Why he was lamenting? Because he started the education, basic education, just to read and write. But then by the time he realized that the people who are coming out of those institutions are actually becoming the clerk to our merchant rulers. So by beginning of 20th century, naturally saw some leaders thinking about our own national education. And one of them, the foremost one whom history will never forget, is Satish Chandra Mukhopadhyay. He was a classmate of Swami Vivekananda, and he was the founder editor of Dawn magazine. In 1902, he organized Dawn Society of Culture to protest against the British rulers. And then came 1905, the period of Bengal partition. And the whole entire Bengal started burning with the protest and boycott. Demand for national education was stronger than ever. Many eminent personalities like Taraknath Palit, Rabindranath Thakur, Rishi Aurobindo, Advocate Rajbihari Ghosh, Subodh Chandra Mollik, Nilratan Sarkar, Brojen Sheel, they all came together to give a shape to our national education system, which was originally conceived by Satish Chandra 14 years back. And in 1906, 2 organizations started their journey. One is the National Council of Education. They set up the Bengal National College, and the focus was literature, science, and technology. And the second organization was Society for Promotion of Technical Education, SPTE. They started Bengal Technical Institute, whose focus was technical education. In 1910, both the organizations got amalgamated and they started their common journey together. But the period, that time, till 1919, was really the struggle for existence. Struggle for money, struggle for getting students, struggle to get a good teachers. Among many, the first principal of Bengal National College, Rishi Aurobindo, was in favor of giving national education but with international standard. So teachers were sent for further education abroad. For example, in 1923, Professor Hiralal Roy, Satish Chandra Bhattacharya, Jotin Basu, they were all sent to obtain doctorate degree in Technische Hochschule in Berlin, Germany. And after 1920 and 25, that particular period, there is no coming back. So we got the right momentum and it kept going. So we started, by the time, our institute was in Maniktola and we shifted to present day Jadavpur campus. We started getting a lot of recognition from international societies, from universities like City and Guilds of London Institute, German universities, US universities, and Edinburgh universities. Recognition came from government companies like Geological Survey, PWD, Madras, etc. And finally, the support came from the private industry houses, TISCO, Bengal Chemical, Russia Distilleries, Bama Lorry, etc. And we must recognize really the contribution of Tata houses to the support to our organizations in recruiting our alumnus to their industries. So today we are a family having a great education institute. We have 36 departments, 16 in engineering, 7 in science, and 13 in arts, 21 interdisciplinary schools, 40 centers of studies, and 96 courses are delivered. Out of them, UG courses 39 and PG courses 57. You all must be wondering why I'm talking so much on our history. Yes, there is a reason. So one great thing has happened in 1921, which I did not mention yet. That is the formation of Old Boys Home. That is the in current day what we call as our alumni association. This is the Old Boys Home, and this year we have a centenary. So I'm proud to state that our alumni association is the oldest functional association in the history of India. So let us join hands to our centenary. We of course decided many programs which all had to be aborted or postponed because of this COVID-19 scenario. Please keep an eye on the social media. We will be coming with many information next year. Now, before I end, let me summarize what I learned from the history of our association and the Jadavpur University. 3E. First E is the experimentation. Those national leaders really did the experimentation. This university or the Bengal National Council of Education did not come in single day. A lot of experimentation has happened. Second is the energy and the entrepreneurial approach. They had a lot of energy and a lot of actions they took as if this is their institute. And the third is the ecosystem development. They really also did a lot of work in developing ecosystem. One university cannot sustain unless until you have a complete ecosystem of students, teachers, industry houses who will employ them, etc., etc. So all these things has really give us that learning 3E. Now, thank you all
for this brief introduction. So now I take great pleasure in introducing today's chair, Commander Sushant Kumar Jana. While selecting the date, we initially considered 25th July because many scientific and technological breakthroughs have happened on this date. The first test tube baby, Lucy Joy Brown, was born on this date, and cosmonaut Savratinska was the first Russian woman, was the first woman to perform the spacewalk. Besides, this year 25th July is being celebrated as Hayara Veteran Day. This was initiated by the Marine Corps of US military, and when we were deciding about the chair, I think Janada's name was an obvious choice for this. Janada graduated from Jadavpur University in 1965 and later on pursued his career in electrical engineering from Ranchi University. While Janada was in Jadavpur, he was also boxing champion for the university. Janada has another really great credential to his career. He fought in 1971 Indo-Pak War from Navy, and he actually fought from both Western sector and Eastern sector. And recently I saw a video where a small documentary film where it is mentioned that the Indian Navy has curtailed the supply of Pakistan soldiers from Marine Wing. So that was mentioned in that. Janada also was in charge for the first Indian nuclear powered submarine, INS Chakra. Following his retirement, Janada has also completed one management course in PGD MS, and he is very much actively involved in various societal activities through Rotary Club and a regular participant in the marathon, Navy marathon, etc. So with this brief introduction, I will request Janada to take over the session.
Good evening, everybody. And thank you, Dr. Pranesh Sengupta, for your sweet, small, and powerful introduction. I sincerely appreciate that. Let me first of all welcome you in this particular forum of centenary celebration of our university, our alma mater. Your presence will definitely brighten up our purpose and makes our university's name immortal. This centenary celebration is for our alma mater, Jadavpur University, which was established and christened as after a amount of effort, time, energy by various big laurels of the country. This was christened as National Council of Education Bengal in the year 1920 by some like-minded Bengali laurels to spread higher education among the local Bengali population, and mainly to control the education system in the hands of the Indian scholars rather than by the Britishers. Acharya Satish Chandra Mukherjee was the main brain behind the move. Someone donated land like Raja Subodh Chandra Basu Mallik. Someone donated money like Advocate Ras Bihari Ghosh, 10 lakh rupees in those days, which is today about 1,000 crores rupees. Some donated labor, some in kind, some by all other efforts. And thus, today has grown that small little seed planted in 100 years ago has grown to a world famous tree of life, as I may say so. This tree is spreading its branches and yielding some of the best fruits. The students, fruits, I mean the students in all corners of the globe. Association with the university is since 1960. I remember my first day attending the preparatory science class in a pair of half pants, staying in SPT hostel room number 2 with 3 other boys. Science College and Arts College were the only 2 wings of the same building were on this sides of the Jhil. 2 buildings on the other side of the Jhil were engineering colleges. Of course, library building, alumni building, and the indoor stadiums were still there that time when I joined. I did not know the meaning of alumni and preparatory science at that time. Coming from free, open, unrestricted green fields under the blue sky of a small time town, Tatanagar, to a place with huge crowd on the street, big buildings with limited boundary walls of a huge city like Calcutta was mind-boggling for us. Never before seen such colorful twinkling lights which used to take us into our immature mind into a fairylands. After passing out from the university, never had an occasion to visit there again until after 54 years, when I visited for the first time to present scholarship to the deserving students from the university on behalf of Mumbai branch of the Alumni Association. Now, my last visit, when I visited after 54 years, it was unbelievable. I entered to the Arts College main gate and thought of walking back straight to the university, and I found buildings after buildings have come up, so many roads are crisscrossing, so many trees have grown big, and finally when I reached to the Rishi Aurobindo building and the same first floor corridor, where we never used to dare looking to the left, where a Gurkha used to sit in front of a room written registered office. Register was like a lion those days for us. Never dared to go to that corridor. And this time, when I went, I knocked at the door, introduced myself. Believe me, Register got up from his chair, came, shook hand with me, pulled the chair for me to sit down and offered me a cup of tea. Imagine the elation in my mind. I felt so happy that this is not land, this is just a human being like us. Or maybe I have changed. This centenary celebration program of this evening is organized by the Jadavpurian stalwarts of BRC. And I am a Fauzi myself. It won't be prudent if I forget to mention BRC's contribution to the Indian Armed Forces. As you know, first Soviet diesel electric submarine came to India, INS Kalveri, in the year 1967. Before that, Pakistan had their submarines, deadly submarines called deadly submarine called what is the submarine which was destroyed by India?
Ghazi.
Anyway, these submarines have got the batteries. Batteries are the lifeline of these submarines. Now, each battery, can you imagine how big are these batteries? 2 feet wide, 3 feet long, and 5 feet tall. And it weighs more than 300 kg each batteries. 448 such batteries divided into two groups. Half of them 224 in one compartment, 224 in another compartment. And this is the main weight of the submarines and main life of the submarine. If the batteries goes bad, no way submarine can come off home. That just finishes there. It was our duty, the electrical people, to charge the batteries and keep it ready for any time. And they have their own self-life. After the battery life is over, we have to buy another set of 448 batteries from USSR and used to pay through our noses. So people like us used to think, why you pay so much? Why can't we make it in India? Then the talk went up to the highest authority and they decided, some of us, to take care of that. So I was detailed to find out where we can get it done and how we can get it done. And we started first scouting for a place, an organization, a company who can do it. Standard Battery was selected. They had enough space to grow. So we found out, evaluated their capacity to grow, evaluated their technical knowledge. And then after establishing Standard Batteries to be able to do our job, we started looking for who can design, who can make it. Then we came to BRC. Dr. Karkanis was the head of the department of chemistry department. So we went, met him, and he spent years together with us. Not years, but 1.5 years together with us. Almost every week we used to come to his office and we used to sit on the table, discuss all requirements, safety requirements, what all safety devices to be made for the batteries. And all these things, finally, after 1.5 years, a prototype battery was made in Standard Batteries. And believe me, we have spent night and days in Standard Batteries to see that that is being made. And it was proved to be twice the capacity of the Soviet submarines, Soviet batteries. And then when first lot of batteries were made, it was loaded on one of the Indian submarines, and it was proved to be 2 times better than the Soviet Union's batteries, and our endurance increased double. The cost came to half. So it was a great job done. And the Soviets came to know about this. They tried their best to know about these batteries and how to do it, where we have done and all these things. But we kept everything secret so that they did not come to know. But it happened that the submarine had to go to Soviet Union Riga for long refit. When the submarine goes for long refit, all the batteries are taken out and kept in a safe place, well ventilated place, and all facility for charging and maintaining these batteries are there available. They've got daily routine, weekly routine, monthly routine, and like that, plenty full book of routines are there, which was being carried very religiously by our people only in Riga. After 1.5 years, when that submarine repair was completed, batteries were being loaded. Lo and behold, last moment we found 2 batteries are short. What happened to those 2 batteries? Every corner was such, batteries were not found anywhere. Even under the kitchen we found batteries were not there anywhere. It was a panic station. Finally, we had to airlift 2 batteries from Vizag to Riga, and the submarine came back. Even today, nobody knows what happened to those batteries. So this was a great contribution of BRC in Indian Armed Forces. Now, after the nuclearization of submarines in India, the contribution of BRC must have been manifold. BRC, NPC and Indian Navy definitely have increased multifold contact and doing together, work together. But being classified and a top secret matter, is less spoken is better. I could go on and on and on, but let's keep that for the next endeavors. I take this opportunity to introduce one very illustrious person who is available here today along with us. And he is a person, a fantastic person. I'm really honored and proud today to introduce him. He's an engineer, he's a professor, he's a doctorate, and a friend of mine, Dr. Vishnupada Bhattacharya. Now, he is a mechanical engineer from Jadavpur University, my alma mater, with a rich experience of over 46 years, with extensive exposure to various aspects of power plants, spanning from concept stage on the drawing board to erection at site up to operation at various places of combined cycle power plant, sponge iron waste heat based power plants, ancient coal field power plants, as well as latest and advanced non-conventional nuclear power plants and power plants based on solar and biofuel. From Development Consultant Private Limited to Thermex Power Division, our guest has a spectrum of experience. It's an experience par excellence. Education and sharing knowledge. Education and sharing knowledge, mind these 2 words, has become Vishnu's passion and an addiction too. At present, he is a part-time faculty with MIT Pune University. He teaches the thermodynamics, power plants, and heat transfer engineering. He is also a part-time lecturer at MIT Pune for pipe stress analysis for postgraduate diploma students, and also a part-time faculty in Postgraduate School of Energy and Technology Department in Savitri Devi Phule University in Pune. What a great jackpot of knowledge. You are great. Not only does he offer knowledge in all areas of power plant in India, his offering goes beyond the borders. He is a part-time lecturer in thermodynamics and machine design in engineering college in Puerto Ordaz, Venezuela. His interests are not just power, but they are powerful too. A keen follower of contemporary interpretation of Indian heritage scriptures. Mind the thing, Indian heritage scriptures. He is also a polyglot. You know what is a polyglot means? He has got professional proficiency with ancient Indian language like Sanskrit and Spanish too. May I now present Senor Vishnupada Bhattacharya, please. Vishnu, please go ahead with your program now. We'll be very grateful to listen from you all the latest technology of power plant. Thank you.
Before I start the technicalities, let me make a corrections. I am not a doctor. I am a simple BE from Jadavpur University, and with some post BE, I studied 2 years in IIT Powai for becoming a doctor, but I did not, or rather could not finish it because my guide became the director, and I was searching for a guide in the institute, and nobody wanted to guide me in the transient analysis of the nuclear plant Narora Atomic Power Project. So at last, I thought that it is not worth requesting the people who do not know what is the subject. So I gave it up. So I am not a PhD. I am, as far as my total education is concerned, it is only okay. I had some 2 years experience in studying in IIT Powai. That's all what I can claim. Now, coming to the subject proper, because already the time may be short, because for how much time has been given to me? 40 minutes or so. See, the subject matter is renewable energy. And it is my personal, what I should say, personal wish that anything that I start with this verse from the Rig Veda. This translation of this is by Max Muller. It says that, yes, we know so many things, but always leave a doubt of what you know, or always leave a doubt of what you do. So I have also got full confidence in what I am doing, but full doubt also. If somebody says, no, this can be done better that way, I am open to it. And I may be learning something new from him. So that is why I cannot claim that whatever I say is the last word on that subject. See, we often say that the science came up in the world only from Renaissance period of Europe. It is not so. And that is why I have particularly mentioned that this mass and energy conversion is a natural process. Now we are giving lot of importance to it, because the simple importance or simple incident that mass can be converted to energy, and that is now everybody knows. I mean, so many cars are running, so many turbines are running. So the mass is converted to energy, but energy converted to mass, the examples are not very simple, though the examples are in your house. children. The children comes out, a tiny small child, and he is fed with milk and food. They are all mass, and it goes into the belly, and it burns, and it makes energy, and that energy adds mass to him, adds intelligence to him, and he grows. So that is a very, what I should say, wonderful example of energy to mass. Okay, proceeding. Now, yes, from Renaissance period onward, studying the nature has been systematically done with lot of experiments and then a decision. That is how we call this science as a real science. Though the fact remains that even before that, many of the things which have taken place in the world, particularly in the eastern part of the globe, which bears, lot of science. Now, how they did it, how they knew all those things is yet being discovered. And unfortunately, how they did it and what they did is now being looked at more seriously, again, by the same scientists of Europe, mostly Europe and America. And we, unfortunately, do not give much respect to this. Anyway, that is beside the point. Now, actually, when you talk about the conversion of energy to mass or mass to energy, the only and whole and sole source of all energy is the sun. Whether it is energy, finally we are getting it from water, from coal, or from oil. The only supplier of source is sun, and that is what this slide is displaying. Now, now I will show that this part, which is the solar part of the energy, can be solar thermal, solar PV, and hybrid with fossil plant. And then there are two thermodynamic cycles, which is Stirling cycle and Ericsson cycle. They are also very near to Carnot cycle, very high efficiency cycle, but commercially it has not yet been effective because it has not been, the people have not been able to make an equipment like this which transfers heat with a very, very low difference of temperature. And that is what is the requirement for Stirling cycle. Now, see, this slide is showing the whole spectrum of energy that comes from the sun. Some are in the visible region, some are beyond visible, some are pre-visible. So whatever is, but everything has got a portion of heat in it, because the light, whatever maybe the what do you call frequency and or amplitude of these light waves or heat waves, it is full of energy, and this energy travels from a very far distance and travels solely by radiation, because the space between the earth and the sun is a large vacuum. Air is only a very short height. And because it is vacuum, so only way of transferring heat in vacuum is radiation. So it comes by radiation, and some of the radiation is captured by the air which is intervening, and finally when it comes to the surface, it gives on an average 72 watt per meter square. Now, incidentally, this slide is not a what I should say calculated slide. Man, it is. I have not done any calculation for this. This is the data which I got from a running power plant, running solar plant, and that plant has got both photovoltaic cell as well as CSP. CSP means concentrated solar radiation. I will not go by line because all these will be eventually available to all of you. Whoever is interested, even I also can send this the whole write-up to you people. The question is that solar PV is now very, very popular. Every rooftop people want to put a solar PV. Fine. The CSP, the concentrated, how see it is the word is not coming properly in my mind immediately. The photovoltaic cell gets directly the radiation from the sun, but in CSP, concentrated solar, you have a surface in the form of a parabola or paraboloid, so that the sun ray which is coming to that parabola is concentrated in the focus. So it becomes intense heat. And in that focus, if you put some water, then it will try to get heated and become steam. And that steam can be used in a turbine.
I can't understand.
Hello? Hello? Okay, fine.
Please go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah. So the solar ESP, CSP is not very popular because it involves a lot of gadgets like concentrator, steam generation, turbine, and the whole turbine cycle. And in a small capacity plant, this is also not very, what I should say, very desirable. But when the plant capacity is large, and when I say large, even for 50 megawatt, 50 megawatt is a large power for solar. The PV is not as efficient as CSP. And that this comparison has shown it. Anybody who is interested to know the details, technical details, we can always discuss about that. And here also again, all this data is also from the same power plant. And incidentally, this power plant is a very small plant, 2 megawatt plant. Some of you or many of you may be knowing an institute called Brahma Kumaris. So Brahma Kumaris, for their Brahma Kumari ashram, for their own need, they use this power. So they have got side by side a 2 megawatt CSP and as well as another 2 megawatt PV. So that the comparison comes very clear. The line by line, I am not going here. If anybody is interested again, we can discuss it later. So this is a view, aerial view of that plant. All whatever the white circle that you are seeing, that is the concentrator. And here if you notice, as if this concentrator, this heat is coming to this place. and where there is a small pipeline going with water in it. So it starts heating from a very ambient temperature, and gradually it becomes hotter and hotter and hotter, and at some time it becomes steam, and sometimes it may be even superheated steam. One more thing I should mention here. See, either PV or solar, sun is sun. You can get it only when there is no cloud. You can get it only during the day when the sun shines. But then out of 24 hours, it is useful only for 5, 6 or 7 hours. But there are some arrangement of storing the heat for night. There are many ways of storing heat for night operation, but this cannot be done for PV. PV does not have that facility, but CSP has got that facility. And this is a wonderful way of storing heat. See, when the radiation comes and it comes to the dish, and the dish concentrates and give it to the focal, the focal point. In the focal point, the steam pipe or the water pipe is inside a metallic system, and where the metal itself also gets hot. During night, this heat absorbed by the metal is used for steam generation and running the turbine. This type of storage, heat storage, has been uniquely done for this Brahmakumari plant, where I personally was associated, and I was also associated with a very big 125 megawatt CSP solar plant by Reliance, and that is near Pokhran. There, a good part of engineering was done by Thermax from the engineering department which I was heading. Now, see, now this I want to little elaborate. What is this? Those who are not directly connected with the solar, power plant, turbine-based power plant, see, there is a boiler here. There is a boiler here which converts water to steam. The steam goes to the turbine, and turbine generates power, and that the exhaust of that steam is condensed and again given back to the boiler. And while it gives back to the boiler, if it can be reheated or rather preheated, then the coal consumption for the boiler reduces. So this is called a regenerative heating. In Bengali, when I take any class either in the university or in the MIT, I tell it in Bengali, macher tele mach bhaja. So that means we are preheating by the same steam which is going through the turbine. But this reduces the coal consumption tremendously. Now, for this preheating, there are in this diagram, 1, 2, there are 2 preheaters, and the generator is not for preheating, it is a requirement for the technical requirement. Now, the preheating, instead of taking it from the steam or from turbine, this can be done by solar heating. If it is done by solar heating, then this plant, whatever coal consumption they are now doing, it will reduce by at least one single distance will reduce by 5 to 10% of coal consumption. And coal consumption reducing means you are reserving the fuel for future, and also reducing the carbon emission. And since this we have got today in India, or not in India, in the whole world, more than 80% of the power still comes from the oil and coal. And all of a sudden, or you can never eliminate them, do away with them. But if you can run those plants by this hybridization, it will be a great job for carbon reduction. So according to me, this is a much more economic way of using solar power. Incidentally, I was also involved in a plant by NTPC where they have installed such hybrid solar system to assist coal-based plant. Sorry, I missed the. So I go to the next slide. See, all these are deep technicals, and I don't think that this is the time that I can go to so much of details. So this is simple. There is nothing to explain here. If you have a water at a very higher height, you can always use a water turbine, and this is, you can say renewable. I will explain why I do not say it renewable. I will come later. But yes, this is also very popular. But it's out of all so-called renewable sources, such turbine is the largest contributor of solar. It is not PV, it is not CSP, it is only this water system. But it has got its bad effect that we will slightly discuss that. Now, see, this is the real useful things, but in a very small way. But it is being done. It is being done almost in all hilly regions. These are also water turbine, but in terms of kilowatt, it does not go to megawatt. It may be 10 kilowatt, 12 kilowatt. So it is a natural, in Bengali what you call jharna, these streams of water which falls. We can see it in Lonavala also when we cross the ghat. Continually there is some water falling. So that falling water, if you can make use, because it has got height, so it can be used for generating power. This type of power generation is a real renewable, and though magnitude wise it does not give much of a production, but this is beautiful, and all of us should do that. Even at our multi-storied building during the rainy season, say past few days in Pune there was a severe rain, and whatever is the amount of water which is coming from the roof and going to the gutter, if we had a turbine, and it is possible, a 5 kilowatt turbine we could have used for generating power throughout the day for the last 3 days at least. So this is another way of renewable power. Next comes the wind. See, wind power is a real free power. There is no problem with this. But the question is, the turbine or rather the generator has to run at a fixed speed. Generator cannot be running at a variable speed. So to have the fixed speed given to the turbine, the gearbox becomes very complex, because you never know the air velocity is sometimes it is high, sometimes it is low, and it is also, it changes direction. So there are some technical nuances, but it has been overcome. And this solar, not solar, this air also is contributing a lot of renewable power these days. This is some data for the generation value. I mean, which country is generating how much using what type of renewable source. See, what is the, I forgot to tell in the beginning, what is the problem? Why we are looking for renewable? For two reasons we are looking for renewable. Because our resource is now reducing. Resource means coal and oil is going to be less and less because we have been consuming it at a very high rate. And because of this combustion process, there is a carbon dioxide which goes with the flue gas. And the carbon dioxide which goes with the flue gas. Hello? Hello? Yeah, the carbon dioxide which goes with the flue gas prevents some of the heat on the earth to get dissipated to the atmosphere. So one purpose of renewable is to reduce the, or rather to increase the dissipation of heat from the surface to the sky, and another is to conserve the oil and coal. So basically for two reasons, the world is now looking for renewable, because to reduce the carbon emission and to save the remaining coal and oil reserve. But the technology now has come that it is not necessary that for avoiding carbon emission, we avoid combustible product. No, because carbon now can be captured in the flue gas itself. So the carbon is not allowed to go to the atmosphere. So that way, for the global warming, it is not a factor anymore from the big plant. But yes, the fuel consumption itself is a factor, no? So the carbon emission is not a factor for the plant running on coal or oil, but using the coal and oil itself is a factor. I mean, you should not use it if you can avoid it. So global warming, to contain the global warming, this renewable is not so much useful, but for conserving the oil and gas, the renewable is useful. So when people say that go for, no, that is the first slide. No, this shows that how the part of the carbon dioxide for a particular frequency, the heat, it captures the heat, and that is how the global warming takes place. See the global temperature from, this has been taken from the Met. I don't have any contribution here, but it shows from 1880 to 2016, the average average earth temperature, earth surface temperature has gone up, but not significantly, but maybe with 3, 4, 5 degrees. But with that itself, the weather has changed. And people are predicting that if it goes further, then there could be a catastrophic change. Now, steps to restrict global warming. I am not saying that the step to restrict our carbon emission. All fossil fuel power plant working for carbon capture. That means you will have to install a mechanism. All big plants running by NTPC or by any other big operator like Reliance and Adani and Ambani, they should be forced to put a mechanism for capturing carbon from the exhaust of all existing plants. This will give a very good result. Then next is reduce dependence on fuel of a plant by adopting renewable free from carbon emission. And free from carbon emission is only the solar, directly solar heat. But apart from there are combustible renewable fuel like biomass, like bagasse. They are combustible. They will also get some carbon dioxide, but the carbon dioxide has to be captured. But you promote using those biomass more and more. I had a very pet point when I was younger. I thought I myself I will do it, but I never did anything like that. See that you know what is water hyacinth? Or in Marathi it's called Jalkumbi or something like that. The many rivers, many ponds, many water bodies are full with water hyacinth. This water hyacinth is also a very good combustible fuel, very good fertilizer, and is also used for water treatment if it can be correctly used. But I find a lot of rivers around Pune are full of water hyacinth. Nobody even cleans it. I mean, this is a health hazard, but nobody is taking care that way. But it can be used with carbon capture. Changing the lifestyle, that is the most difficult, but that is the most effective. If you can avoid freeze, you cannot avoid. AC you cannot avoid. But if you can just avoid AC, there will be a big relief to the global warming. The overall perspective, and this I will read it out from here itself, because this has been compiled very recently. Energy audit. See, the operating plant throughout the country, I am particularly talking about India, where I have visited many operating plants. If I go there, stay there for 2 days, I find that things can be modified, things can be improved to reduce the coal consumption significantly, at least 5%. And 5% is a very big figure for a big power plant. That means they are not operating it properly, or whatever can be done to increase their efficiency, they are not doing it. And that is why Thermax has got now a totally different department for audit and improvement of the existing power plant. And I think this should be done in all government plant and big plant also. But I don't find much interest of the owner of the plants. That is another factor. See, it was another point for the hydro. See, hydro also doing a lot of damage to the ecosystem. Big dams, when you are creating on a flowing river like Ganges or like big rivers, see, the downstream becomes waterless. And that has got a far-reaching consequence to the ecosystem, to the people living there also. So it is not fair to say that, okay, the water anyway can be used as a non-renewable. Yes, it can be used, but it has got its downside also. Before I conclude, I will conclude now. Before I conclude, see, though I have worked in all areas, many areas, but my favorite subject, apart from Sanskrit is my most favorite subject, but that is not engineering. But my engineering most favorite subject is thermodynamics. And I wonder how if the world people are thinking that they will bring down the global warming by doing all these things. According to me, it is not possible. The global warming cannot be prevented because of 2-3 reasons. Have you ever read that the center of the earth, you know what is the temperature of the center of the earth? At the center of the earth, it is same as the temperature of the sun. So that heat and our earth's surface is a normal temperature. So there is such a big temperature difference. So the heat transfer is taking place continuously. The global warming, even if the temperature rises by 1 degree centigrade, think how much extra evaporation will take place on the sea and the ocean. How much extra evaporation will take place? And all those evaporations are coming back in the form of rain. That is why the weather is changing. If you do a heat balance diagram, if you want to balance the heat around the globe, around our earth, the heat that is coming and the heat that is going, and heat is coming from the sun, heat is coming from the center of the earth also. Unless you make use of all those heat for energy, but those energy also finally becomes heat, because heat is the lowest grade of energy. We work, we eat, we speak, all this gets converted to heat. See the population which has grown so high, so big. Our activities has gone haywire. So the heat, if you do a heat balance, you will see that the temperature will gradually, very slowly will rise. And when it really rises to, see, another 2 degree temperature rise of the globe, there will be a mass extinction. And this is not my prediction. You open your net and see just that type mass extinction, and they will get even a figure when it is going to take place, when it is likely to take place. And this study has been done by Harvard and many other universities in Europe and America. All what we can do is we can save some combustible fuel, we can change our lifestyle so that it slows down. Instead of in another 100 years, maybe we can run it another 200 years or 300 years by a proper discipline. Otherwise, the global warming will take place and it cannot be made zero, never. So that is my own personal estimation, and I think I have very quickly said whatever I wanted to say, but I am a person of the detailing, not really the what you call say statistics and what could happen, what might not happen. If any details of any of the things that I have told here, further details, even outside this discussion also, any individual can openly talk to me, and whatever I know, I will share. And thank you very much. Saying so much of good words for me, I am doubtful whether I am worth it. Okay. Now I give it to the management back. So what next? Oh, the sorry. I have not shown one slide. Is it visible now? My slide is visible. My slide is visible.
Yes, visible.
Yes, I am a fan of Sanskrit. I am a fan of Vedas and Upanishads, which I will not bore you by saying here. But this particular one, which is you can see on the screen, you know, like our Max Muller translating the Rig Veda. There is one American who translated the Atharva Veda. Max Muller never came to India. He only got information from other sources and he translated it. But that gentleman from America, he came to India and he searched every nook and corner for the manuscripts of Atharva Veda. And he collected manuscripts from Kashmir, from Orissa, from the south, and he went back with a mind of translating it. So he had a small school. Yeah, so his school, Sanskrit school. So his students, his wife, and he, all of them started translating the Atharva Veda from Sanskrit to English. But halfway, that gentleman died. So only the students and his wife took it through and published the book. Incidentally, during my Sanskrit study, I also bought the English translation of that Atharva Veda, which is there with me now. So here it says, the last two, for these last two lines, I am showing this one, that it says that learner dieth, learning never dies. We are all learner. We will not be there one day. But the process of learning will continue. So that I found is a very great statement by.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sure all of you have heard this Vishnu's very experienced lecture and have a lot of questions in your mind. There can be a lot of questions in a lot of people's mind, and you would like to ask those questions so that you can get your answers now. So let me introduce another illustrious person. I'm proud and truly honored today to get the opportunity to introduce another illustrious personality, my friend and my brother, Sapon Kumar Ghosh. He's a former director HR, an outstanding scientist, from the Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited. He has proved himself to be an outstanding scientist in NPC. Swapan Ghosh is a mechanical engineer from Jadavpur University, Kolkata in 1968, a graduate from 12th batch of BRC Training School, Nuclear Science and Technology, fellow All India Management Association, fellow of Indian Institute of Material Management, member of Indian Council of Arbitration, executive committee member, Indian Nuclear Science, and executive committee member of American Nuclear Society in India section. Mr. Ghosh has over 53 years of experience in nuclear power industry and served at various positions in India and abroad. With initial 15 years in fast breeder reactors technology and the next 18 years in pressurized heavy water reactor technology, and thereafter with Indian private sectors in nuclear business. Till as late as February 2020, he is a hard-working person, never stopped working. His experience, knowledge, and hard work has honored him serving beyond the Indian horizon. He was appointed in the Indian Embassy, Paris, as First Secretary on Science during the period from 1985 to 89. The key areas of his expertise was nuclear technology transfer with first and engineering projects. One second. Management is global resourcing, quality assurance management, HR management, consultancy, and international relations and cooperation. On superannuation from Nuclear Power Corporation of India Limited as Director HR and an outstanding scientist, Mr. S.K. Ghosh has initially worked an advisor in nuclear business to CEO Tata Consultancy Engineers, and again thereafter he worked as advisor in nuclear business, advisor to the MD and CEO of Walchand Nagar Industries. That is Mr. Swapan Kumar Ghosh, and now I present him to you to handle the question answer as the advisor of the question answer business in this forum. Swapan Kumar Ghosh, please take over to answer the question of the public. Thank you very much, Swapan.
Thank you, Dhananda. Thank you very much for introducing me. And now we are going to start the question answer session. My request is that I have seen Rajat has already raised his hand. Be brief, and we will discuss the question answers, and we'll request Vishnu to answer the queries which our friends, our participants will have. And I see is an interesting presentation. Well, carbon emission and all this kind of thing, global warming. Since I have spent my life with the nuclear power, I will be a little bit biased for nuclear power. Yes, that should be. But anyway, a small piece of information I would like to give. Recently, it has been seen the clean energy technologies, and it is seen that nuclear power only emits 12 grams of carbon dioxide per kilowatt hour, while the least is wind, which is 11 grams per kilowatt hour, whereas the coal emits near about 820 grams per kilowatt hour. So this is clean energy technology, but this is not the debate we should have. but it should be said that we need a stable power, because all this, whatever Vishnu has said, it cannot be, if there is no sun, there will be no solar power. If there is no wind, there will be no wind power. So whatever may be the renewable, you need power, because Dr. Homi Bhabha had said a long time back, no power is costlier than no power. So you need base stations which will have which will ensure the power is available 24/7. So that's the thing today. We have to balance our all this aspect, aspiration, health, and everything. So let's start the question hour session. And I would request Rajendra to have the first question. He has raised his hand. Rajendra, please.
Good evening to everybody. I could not just attend this seminar from the beginning because of some disturbances that I gathered from to go into the system for the presentation. So I missed some part of Vishnu's presentations. But what I understand, and my question is actually the renewable, so-called the renewable energy, whether it is through the wave energy or through the solar systems, or through the reflectors or wind, what it may be, the generation capacity is not that much that it will be used in a system where the requirement of the energy will be almost like 50 megawatt or 60 megawatt. So so whatever you generate through renewable system of energy, it has to go to the grid, and from the grid you draw the power. But overall, if you see the perspective of India, total energy security, I think still today, I think it is renewable energy system is abysmally small compared to that of the power system that is coming from coal or oil. So it is going, of course, nuclear is giving a lot of systems, and it is going to grow, and it's a huge power energy is possible to get from the nuclear sources itself. But the time will tell us to. So my point is that in terms of, if you equate that sort of energy and go to the systems of carbon absorptions and reduce the global warming, it is not going to take place in renewable energy for the next 50 or 60 years or so. That's my feeling. I may be wrong. And please educate me how it can be done. Second point is that there are plenty of chemical industries where the reactions are exothermic, and there's a lot of heat generates out of the chemical reactions, and that energy waste heat should be suitably used for the applications of energy requirement for the sources. Many of the industries in India at the moment, they do not recover the waste heat recovery systems at all. I'm surprised to say that the government is not looking into this matter at all. So I want to know per se how integrated systems, by doing a master plan of the total Indian industry, to know how much of energy is possible to generate from those resources and be utilized, and whatever carbon dioxides are being vented out, it should be absorbed, and there should be a national grid for the carbon dioxide. Unfortunately, carbon dioxide, whatever is absorbed, is not being utilized unless there is a fertilizer plant or for enhancement of the oil. Government must think and put a think tank to find out exactly how carbon dioxide can be absorbed and taken to the underground grid systems for supplying wherever the carbon dioxide is required. Mostly it will be required for enhancing the oil recovery by dosing into the ocean and get the oil lift up, which are difficult to raise otherwise. The huge requirement of carbon dioxide will be required for there. And nobody is thinking of that line. Unfortunately, we do not plan our industries in an integrated manner, how it should be done. It comes up bits and pieces here and there, and there is no integration possible. So if you can attack this as a sequel to your presentation and come out with this, a formidable solution for that, country will be benefited. Thank you.
Vishnu, can you please respond?
Yeah, you can hear me?
Yeah, we can hear.
Okay, fine.
Yes.
The first thing, very quickly, I get from Mr. Ghosh, Sopon Ghosh,
Yes, please.
that the clean energy is nuclear energy. Yes, relatively that is the cleanest energy, but I cannot call it clean energy because the efficiency of a turbine running on nuclear plant is very low with respect to the efficiency of any fossil fuel plant. And this inefficiency part is also going to as a heat to the atmosphere. See, this is a part of thermodynamics. So it does not give any carbon emission. Carbon emission is zero. But there is a heating process of the atmosphere through the inefficiency of the your nuclear fuel. But yes, comparatively, that way, since it does not remit any carbon, so that way it can be called clean. Now, Rajat, about the use of waste heat. See, I have done lot of waste heat plant, at least 10 to 15 waste heat plant I have engineered, including Tata Sponge. But see, it has got a limitation. Limitation means one is the techno-commercial aspect. Another is by using the waste heat, you can bring down the temperature of the outgoing gas to at least 120, 130, 140, but not lower than 120. So even the waste heat also has got some waste. So it cannot be made zero. But yes, it is also not true that the waste heat is not being used. Yes, waste heat is being used in industry. Maybe, I mean, somewhere some people might not have so far done. But it is also being done if it is cost effective. As far as again coming to carbon dioxide, when the carbon can be separated as a carbon, I mean, elemental carbon, not carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide also can be separated, but it takes a lot of money for that. But separating this as an elemental carbon is easier. Yes, I can see Rajat is nodding his head. Separating carbon dioxide, separating sulfur dioxide has been done now effectively. But for the carbon dioxide separation as carbon dioxide and using the purity of that carbon dioxide to use for fertilizer or for other use, I am not. I do not know whether effectively it can be done. because it was not a part of my understanding in the power plant. I think you raised only these 2 points, no? Yeah. But again, I am reinforcing one thing. Please, all of you, understand that the problem is two. One is global warming, another is availability of fuel. Availability of fuel, there are many. And if we use those fuel, avoiding carbon emitting, the global warming will be slowed down. Global warming can never be made zero because fundamental heat balance does not allow to balance make the global warming zero. Number two is that in our normal life, we know all of us are going to die. But when we are sick, we go to a doctor, we take some medicine so that our life is there a little longer, knowing fully well that we will never live infinite number of years. Even for the earth and its atmosphere and everything, scientifically, it can be proved that global warming can be slowed down, but it cannot be brought to zero. Okay, next question.
If that is satisfied, Rajendra, then I for next question. Rajendra, any comment you want to make? No.
Mute,
Okay.
mute, Rajendra, mute.
Rajendra, you unmute and then if you want to make a comment. Oh. Okay, I would request now.
Already all whatever you are saying is being done. Is being done. But what contribution it has got is a very, very minuscule contribution. And wherever it is possible, it is already in process. The basic question is that none of us are raising any question of our own way of life. We want 10-ton AC to be working in my flat itself. If I can avoid it, it will help. How many people are really doing that or thinking about that? So lifestyle has to change if you want to live a little more number of years.
I can
Fine.
some of us
Amol,
are you able to hear me?
Kindly wait. Rajendra has a supplementary query because we have shortage of time. We have to complete this point.
Yeah. No, this is in my syllabus. It is within my syllabus. The answer to this question is within my syllabus, and I also sincerely want the Jadavpur University Alumni Association make a note or make a note of recommendation, and I am very serious about it, that make a recommendation that what is the quickest way of avoiding very fast global warming and also the saving of the fuel, combustible fuel. Number one, according to me, is hybrid plant. All NTPC has got so many plants of 1000 megawatt, 500 megawatt. In each plant, it should be visited by a group of experts, maybe 3, 4, 5 people, not more than that, technical people, that where the plant can be improved, plant efficiency can be improved, and which regenerative heater can be replaced by solar, and how much. And by calculation, we will show that what benefit it will give it to them. So if really Jadavpur alumni takes it up as a sort of a project means only submission of a proposal. If you take it up as a project, and if I am here, I can give all what I have, not money, but my mind.
Okay.
Yes, Vishnu.
Now, can
IIT Bombay has got a Department of Energy, and I understand they are doing some good jobs. Can we have also a Department of Energy in our alma mater? Can we suggest that to Jadavpur University?
See, I do not want to go to politics. This is alma mater is now a politics. So
Vishnu,
but we can do it in Bombay itself. Yeah.
No debate. Acha, now Arunabha has.
I have one point.
Yeah. Tell me.
Can I talk?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Not
Now,
long.
This is my suggestion. Suggestion is that I fully agree that in our power energy security scenario, the renewable energy and fossil fuel energy and nuclear power energy should concurrently run, and they should progress together. But having said that, I would rather emphasize on one point, that if you all recall, before 2018, our generation of power in our country was almost like 85,000 megawatt. And after 2018, when there was a recommendation given by the then Prime Minister, Mr. Manmohan Singh, another 20,000 megawatt were added to that on a high-speed completion schedule. So if you make all together, it will be almost like 130,000 megawatt, 35,000 megawatt of power generation. This 135 megawatt power, 30% of that are owned by the private sector by way of medium-sized power like 300 megawatt or 400 megawatt or 500 megawatt in cement plants and other plants. None of these plants, they are polluting atmosphere. They are all polluting atmosphere by using, without having any kind of a fuel, FGD system in the power plant. So when you are talking about the carbon emission and global warming and all that, nobody is thinking how our power plants are being operated. There was no FGD even in power.
This I have already used.
So unless you carry out on a topmost priority basis to introduce the FGDs and reduce the emission level to the atmosphere, the solution will not come out. So that is the first attack before talking about the renewable energy and all that. If you want the emphasis to be given that global warming is taking place, that is attack that actually and set it right. Unless you do that, it will be a havoc system.
Well taken. Your point is well made. And I would request Dibyendu, you have a query or you would like to say something, Dibyendu?
Yes. So I don't have a query. If you allow me, I would like to add two things here. First of all, I have noted this request for making some kind of a energy recommendation to Niti Aayog that I have noted. So separately we'll discuss. one of the important learning from this discussion is that, which Vishuddha has already highlighted, that the combinatorial effect of various forms. That means the conventional solar, conventional coal-based plant with the solar like that. So this is a very important things we have to consider. And the important part, since I was also engaged with some of the studies, I know that one of the very silent and hidden point, one of the slides Vishnu has shown, we still today do not know how much we are contributing life cycle sustainability. For example, to produce a PV cell, how much energy we are consuming and what carbon we are emitting in the whole process, we do not know. So the moment these studies are, it will take much time, because IET, International Energy Commission, IEC, they are doing that such kind of a study. If that is available, maybe 10 or 15 years down the line, we will know that perhaps producing a solar cell is more harmful to the whole industrial chain or the value chain than the coal. That kind of things, knowledge still today we do not have. For example, already some people have started talking, even the offshore wind plant will change the wind pattern of a country. The whole rain and harvesting cycle will be different. So we simply do not know. With the available knowledge, I think the best way to go forward is to see the combinatorial effect, outrightly not reject the conventional things. So that is my takeaway.
Very good point. We can debate on that. Absolutely no issues. Is there anybody else wants to make a comment? Amol, you want to make a comment?
Working overtime now.
Hello?
No, yeah, Amol, do you have anything to say?
No, I think we have come to the conclusion. Only
Yes.
thing, as is rightly mentioned, that this should not be a memory that we have a lecture on renewable energy. We should go something beyond that, because otherwise we only discuss and we lament, but nothing happens. If we can bring at least something to reality through our efforts, because we are people who should focus on implementation, not only giving information. I believe in this, so I make a suggestion whether we can do something about it. This is not the forum to discuss that.
Good point. Good point. If this is there is no other further query and nobody wants to speak, we would like to close our question answer session. And now the time for vote of thanks. I would like to invite our young engineer, not engineer, I'm sorry, young scientist, Sharmistha Datta Chaudhary, to propose the vote of thanks. Prior to that, I would like to introduce her. I'm very happy, very proud that a person from our university who has done her MSc, she was a gold medalist 2000, and then there she has done also PhD from Jadavpur University. She is the recipient of DAE Young Scientist Award, BRC Young Scientist Award by INSA, NSI of India. She is a brilliant girl, and I am very happy that she is working on specialization is fluorescence spectroscopy in supermodular and plasmonic systems. So it's a very difficult words, but anyway, Pranesh has told she is working on the solar cell, the requirement of this, and she is a brilliant girl and working in BRC, and I am very proud that she is there, and she will be proposing a vote of thanks on behalf of us. Sharmistha, if you please go ahead.
Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and very good evening to all of you. So on behalf of JUAM, it is now my pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks to all those who have contributed in making today's event a very successful one. So first of all, I would like to thank our speaker, Mr. Vishnupada Bhattacharya, for accepting our invitation, for sharing his vast knowledge with us. And it was really a very engrossing lecture, and we got to learn about so many different aspects of renewable energy and also the associated challenges of global warming. So thank you very much. And I also would like to thank Commander S.K. Jana, who marvelously conducted today's session. Unfortunately, he had to leave the meeting, so he is not there with us right now. But for the record, we sincerely thank him for being with us and also for regaling us with very interesting anecdotes, his experience about submarine batteries, and also the time spent at Jadavpur University. And finally, I would also like to thank Mr. S.K. Ghosh for conducting a very lively discussion session and also for sharing his thoughts. He has a very vast experience in the energy sector, so we are grateful to you for being with us today. And I thank all the members of the workshop organizing team, without whose efforts today's event or the webinar series that we are conducting would not have been possible. And most importantly, I thank all participants who have joined us. And I hope we will have more participation for our future events. So please, we will come back again with the third edition. This was the second edition. We will come back again with the third edition on again another contemporary topic. So I welcome you all to join us again for our events. And thank you all very much. Be safe, be healthy, and good night.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.